Today, I'm going to give you one tip for better kick drum sequencing. Freebeat. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to Freebeat, where I post new music-related content every single day, so if that sounds good to you, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. Be sure to check out my upcoming free live stream concert, Freebeat Live The Next Level. It's going to be a ton of fun, and if you want your music featured in the show, be sure to click the link in the description. You just have a few days left to get your track submitted. Today's patron shoutout goes to Asion. Thank you so very much for the support. Let's get started. Today's video is about drum sequencing, and I will be demonstrating it on the Electron model cycles. However, you can use any drum machine that you would like. This video applies to any drum machine available. The only reason I'm using the model cycles is for the purposes of this demonstration. We will be using a 4-bar phrase, and on the model cycles, it's really easy for the viewer to tell what measure we are on with this indicator here. So that's why I'm using the cycles. So in electronic music, the kick drum is often the focal point of the entire song. It's what our listener latches onto. It's what they can bob their head to. A lot of times it's what the sidechaining of other instruments is tied to. It's just a really emphatic part of the song, and it really dictates a big direction for where the song goes. However, in my opinion, it can also easily become one of the most boring parts of any electronic music track. Tell me if you have ever done this. Okay, here we go. Time to write a new piece of music. Let's get started. Kick drum, all right. All right, my kick drum part is done for the entire 7-minute track. Don't lie, I know you've done it because I've done it too. It's very, very easy to just put your kick drum on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. By the way, today we're going to count our sequencer grid like this. 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and But yeah, it's really easy to just put your kick drums on the downbeats, otherwise known as 4 on the floor, and just leave it there and move on. However, like I said, I find that really boring, and you might not realize it, but it might actually be dragging your track down. So today we're going to talk about one tip that I use to improve my kick drum sequencing, and I think it'll help you out too. You need to make your kick drum tell a story. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's a pretty similar concept to a traditional drumming and just musical concept in general, which is pose a question and then answer the question. We've talked about that before on the channel. I believe I did some PO32 tonic sequencing talking about like question and answer phrasing a few years ago. But essentially, you make a pattern that sort of feels unresolved, and then you follow it up with a pattern that resolves. Telling a story is a very similar concept to that. You just wind up thinking about it in a slightly different way. So let's think of the parts of a story. We typically have, the part where our characters are setting, the plot is just established, and then we actually move along that plot. We hit a peak where things are, at their tensest, and then we resolve that tense conflict or whatever, the tensest point of the story is. Then we resolve it and come back down. So we need to think of that grid while we are working on our song. And it doesn't have to be a perfect flat line, up, down, flat line. But that's a really great sequencing tip, to think of that storyline. And this storyline, by the way, can be as long as you'd like. You can work on telling your story with one kick drum part the entire song. This can be 1,000 measures, or this line can represent 4 measures, which is what we are going to do today. So right off the bat, I'm just going to set my pattern here to 64 steps long, otherwise known as 4 measures. To follow along on what measure we're on, you can see this little lit up LED here. We've got measure 1, measure 2, measure 3, and measure 4. Okay, now we're back to measure 1. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, we need to establish our story, as it were. So I think starting with a 4 on the floor measure is a great way to establish our story, and we've already done that. Cool, so there's our baseline. Our story has been established. We need to listen to this several times and figure out where we want the story to go. I'm thinking of going something like this. Dun, 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 dun. We're going to establish that the kick drum is not always going to show up on the downbeat of beat 1. So we're on measure 2 right now. Let's go ahead and fill in the rest of our quarter notes because I think I do want them in there because the story does have to align at least a little bit with what we originally set up. But instead of putting the final kick drum here on the downbeat, let's move it to the and of 1. Remember, 1 E and. So now we should have done, 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 rest, dun, 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 done, okay? The second measure plays on the first measure a little bit, but pushes it forward in our story. Let's go back to measure 1, start from the beginning, and hear both of these. Here we go. Nice, that sounds pretty good if you ask me. It does sound simple, but we've arrived at this pattern in a slightly more complex mentality, which is going to allow us to add to it a little easier than normally. So let's go to measure 3. And I think what I want to do story-wise is combine our first two patterns. So our first pattern was 4 on the floor, just like that. And our second pattern had a kick drum also on the and of 1. So let's hear what this sounds like now. Back to measure 1, let's have a listen. I think that sounds pretty good, but I want to add a little more. This should be where the story is almost at its peak, right? So we started with a flat line, then we started to raise it, we changed it up a bit, we're raising our question, we're furthering our story in the second measure. We need to push that just a little bit further, and I'm not sure combining the first two patterns is enough to do that. Let's put a 16th note on the E of beat 1. That'll give us a pattern that sounds like this. Da-ga-da-da-da-da. Let's hear it in context with measures 1 and 2. That's pretty cool. If we wanted to raise the tension even more, we could put another kick on the and of beat 2 here. 1 E and 2 E and. Let's hear that with the other measures. Now, for me personally, that's a bit much, so I'm going to take off that kick on the and of 2, but you might like it. It might work for your story. That's another reason the story comparison works so well. Everyone has a different story, which can kind of free you up mentally, put you in a better headspace to work on your music. This is your music, no one else's. All right, so measure number 4, the resolution of our story. How are we going to do this? Well, given how busy measure 3, the tensest point of the story is, I think I want a little bit of breathing room at the start of the resolution of pattern or measure 4. This will also reference how the story began moving in measure 2. So we're not going to have anything on the downbeat of measure 4. Really quick, I do know that I want that quarter note feel, so I am going to automatically fill in beats 2, 3, and 4. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and, just like that. Since I talked so much about measure 2, I definitely think I want to kick right here on the and of 1 as well. Now let's go to measure 3 and look at what we did here. We had 3 16th notes here, which at the beginning of the measure really made it feel tense. What happens if we, in measure 4, which is where we are now, move them right here? So what if we take that little 8th note here that we established in measure 2 and put the 16th note right here on the of 1 rather than the E of 1 like we did in measure 3? Let's hear it in context with the rest of our patterns. I don't really like that there, actually. It still sounds too tense. It doesn't give really a resolved feeling. So I think what I want to actually hear is ba-ba-ga-da-da-da. I think that will resolve what we set up in measure 3 really nicely. So instead of da-ga-da-da-da, I want da-da-ga-da-da-da. That still leaves the downbeat of beat 1 empty, still introduces a new 16th, which I will place here on the E of beat 2. Remember, 1 E and 2 E and that will also introduce a new note that we haven't heard before. We're going to fill in the and of 2 with a kick drum here, and that will give us that da-da-ga-da-da-da. And I think this will resolve the story quite nicely. Let's have a listen. I'm going to go to measure 1. Here we go. You know what? I want da-da-ga-da-da-da-da. That'll introduce another new note that we haven't heard on the and of beat 3. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and. Now let's go back to the beginning and listen to all 4 measures. Can you hear the story unfolding? And repeat. Hopefully using my hand to narrate the story, as it were, works. It's the best thing I could think of to demonstrate what can be sort of an abstract concept in actual practice. And like I said, it is a story, but it is your story. So you get to determine what that means to you. And the coolest thing is that you don't even have to share your story with the audience. You can do it in a lot more subtle a manner than I have done here. And of course, like I said earlier, you can make it as long or as short as you want. You could, in theory, have a story that's only 1 measure long. That's certainly doable, I'm sure, in the proper context. That's another thing about a lot of my drum sequencing tip tutorial videos, whatever you want to call them. A lot of times the content by itself does require context. So I will put that little disclaimer in right now. I would love to know what you thought of this video and if you've ever used a storytelling or storytelling-esque technique, especially on just even one part of a track, in this case, one part of a kit, really, in any of your music before. Let me know in a comment down below. I do hope you found this video informative or at least entertaining. If you did, be sure to leave a like on it. If not, you can always leave a dislike. That's okay too. Doesn't hurt my feelings, just makes me try that much harder next time. Either way, be sure to hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. Thank you all so very much for being here. Hope to see you at the live show, by the way. Going to be a ton of fun. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.